I know you. You know you. And I know you know that I know you.
Hi everyone, welcome to Priority Holder. And today we're playing Blue-Black Faeries in the Timeless format. So the tools we're working with today are Faerie Mastermind, which is like a flash threat and like a pseudo draw punisher. So if the opponent draws a second card, you get to draw one. And it's also mana sink that prompts each player to draw a card. We're also running a couple Brazen Borrowers, a couple Vendilion Cliques, a couple Talion. So that's like our Faeries package. Now, Vendilion Clique and Faerie Mastermind actually play super nicely with Orcish Bowmasters because both of them can induce draw triggers for the opponent. Basically, you can force Bowmaster triggers upon them. And so they also many of these play at instant speed, so we can like jam up the opponent's resources with counterspells and then slip in threats when we can. So we have a ton of like instant speed interaction with Remand, Mana Drain, Stifle, Fatal Push, so we have a lot of action. So basically we're trying to tempo control our way to victory. So let's jump into some games. So this hand is so close, like Brainstorm might be able to get there, but not with double 4-drops. Another one-lander, but I think I'm going to keep it off the strength of Thoughtseize plus the Stifles. So I wouldn't fault you for Thoughtseizing here. I think I just left up Stifle off the strength of like stifling a fetch or a Chromox. I end up spell piercing it, but there is an argument to stifling it instead, because spell pierce can tend to be more valuable for other non-creatures. So didn't draw a land, so we're just going to Thoughtseize now, and boy are we glad we did. I'm going to take the Charbelcher and leave them with just a bunch of setup cards and hoping they didn't draw like something good. Okay, now that's the tough thing, is the opponent was really riding on that Chromox, so us countering that has really thrown off their plan, except now they found a black source, so they're going to throw out a Wishclaw Talisman. We're just going to remand that right back to the hand, just going to keep delaying and trying to develop our mana. And we have fortunately found lands 3 and 4, but the problem is we have absolutely no clock right now, so we just got to disrupt them until we can find a threat, basically. Right, but the opponent is really messed up from that earlier Chromox play, so we're going to get a Surveil land to try and find some action. Spell Pierce. I almost just tossed it into the graveyard, but it's just a powerhouse against their deck, so I figured, we could still have a pretty profitable turn grabbing another Surveil land and just keep up Spell Pierce. So this is a tough spot because they could generate some extra mana to play around Spell Pierce, but boy am I glad I didn't Spell Pierce the Dark Ritual, because now we can Spell Pierce the Beseech, which also then takes care of their Wishclaw Talisman. So they used a ton of materials that we were able to just sort of easily take care of. So they're like hemorrhaging resources, and we're very nicely surveilling that land away. And Remand and a pair of Stifles in hand is pretty good. The Battle at the Bridge / Fatal Push is not looking useful in this matchup. Alright, their guy's Blessing, and they're mostly wanting to just draw a card. But I'm going to Remand it just to, once again, keep stalling them out. And we drew a Faerie Mastermind, which is excellent, because that's going to at least put them under a clock, right? And a Brazen Borrower as well. So the bounce mode on Brazen Borrower might actually matter. Like putting like a Charbelcher back into their hand is like a pretty big deal. Alright, we are going to let the guy's Blessing happen. But we actually get a Faerie Mastermind trigger, which is super nice. And we draw a Talion, the Kindly Lord. I want to increase the clock here. So as useful as Brazen Borrower is, like I'm not super scared of a Charbelcher with double Stifle in hand. And it just seemed really worthwhile to like accelerate the clock by a whole lot. And then a Thoughtseize right here is super clutch. So if they got any closer to assembling it, we can undo it right here. See if the opponent has a response. Alright, so they have Grief, Charbelcher, and Leyline. So we're going to take the Charbelcher, just keep them off that. Alright, so they're going to Grief us right now. And it does seem worthwhile to stifle the discard. Basically, we get to choose what we discard, make them discard, So it seems worthwhile to do that. And we know that their whole hand is face up right here, so we know like we're getting super close. Like in 2 turns, they're basically dead. And thanks to Talion, there's actually a way we can just lock up the kill right now. So we can knock them down to 2 and play Talion. And basically the only way they can win is like they rip a Charbelcher. I don't even know if that's even good enough. So I'm just going to name 4 on Talion. That way, even if they somehow get a Charbelcher in play, it just Talion dings them and makes them lose. So going to see if that's enough. opponent's going to fire off a Dark Ritual. You could also name one on Talion to like punish those. So the opponent's just showing us what they drew, and that's it for them. So on to the next game. This is a lot more lands, so we're happy about that. Unfortunately, I have no turn, like, one mana interaction like Spell Pierces or Stifles or Thoughtseizes, so it is a shields down moment. Mana Drain is super clutch, so we're gonna hold on to that Cavern for now and just hold up Faerie Mastermind / Bowmasters / Mana Drain. And that, like, these control tempo decks really have that advantage of having like a ton of options. And so as we crack our fetch, if you enjoy seeing like tempo control games, please Snare Master Sprite the like button. Just gonna grab a basic here, not exactly sure what we're playing against. And I'm gonna run out Faerie Mastermind just because it's really nice to catch like a Brainstorm or something with the Bowmaster. So I'm gonna play our Cavern and crash in. So I'm only playing 2 copies of Cavern. I don't think you can go too deep with all the Spell Pierces, Brainstorms, Stifles, Thoughts. Like, you're just gonna, you need some sources of colored mana. So the opponent's playing Awaken the Honored Dead, which is not the biggest problem ever. So I decide it's worth it just to save the mana drain for something even more nasty than that. Like, basically it's just a kill spell against our Faerie, and we can just play a new one, you know. So I'm gonna play a new Faerie Mastermind. I'd like to wait on the Vendilion Clique until I have at least, you know, ideally both Faerie Mastermind and Bowmasters in play, because then it would just really go off. Alright, so we see some cards at the graveyard. It seems like there's sort of like a mid-rangey, control-y kind of deck. Fangkeeper's Familiar, just main phase. We're going to mana drain that, and going to just play Orcish Bowmasters. Once again, the power of having both those in play when you Vendilion Clique them is incredible. Right, so we're going to get some mana drain mana. So because we have so much mana drain mana, I'm actually going to just fire off Faerie Mastermind at least one time. Like, sure, it draws them a card, but it you know, it induces a Bowmaster's trigger, and we can do like a wombo combo right here of Vendilion Clique into Thoughtseize. So Vendilion Clique is not only going to like interrupt their hand, which, yeah, we're going to take the Deadly Cover, but it's going to induce another draw, which triggers both Bowmasters and Faerie Mastermind. So you can see like the sort of cool synergies Faeries have with each other. Makes me wonder if I should be running even more copies of Vendilion Clique. And yeah, the opponent has just seen enough. We disrupted everything they were doing. Into the next game, a really slow hand. I'm just going to get the tap land out of the way, and we see Den of the Bugbear from the opponent into Swift Spear. So Bowmasters could be reasonable here. The Remands will be a little bit weaker considering the opponent probably has a high density of 1 mana spells. Alright, Dragon Blood Twins. Going to just, and this will be a little painful, gonna have to lock, well, I guess we could get a basic Swamp there. Yeah, but we have some double blue cards though, like we want mana drain up if we draw one, so going to remand that. And yeah, so this is why you get the shock, even though it's really painful against red, because now we have options for mana drain, and Cavern was pretty nice as well, just to keep the mana developing. Don't love the situation though. And so right now I'm only running 3 copies of Fatal Push, just trying to get the right balance of being able to fight combo decks, you know, with Spell Pierces, and then like creature decks like Energy with Fatal Pushes, you know. So the opponent actually exerts their arena for their Dragon Blood Twins, and I'm actually going to mana drain it here just to get like an infusion of mana to like dump our hand, and don't want to, you know, I just want to keep developing the board. That was a pretty aggro move for them, and I guess we could have just remanded it also, but going to play Bowmasters off some of the mana, and then I decide it's probably worth it to Brainstorm and see if we can hit another land, which we do. The question is, what do we put back? Vendilion Clique seems a little clunky against what they're trying to do, though I guess inducing the Bowmaster triggers is like something though, so I'm gonna put both of these back, and we have sort of like the awkward situation where we like, you know, we don't exactly want to fetch because Remand and Vendilion Clique aren't the worst cards to draw, but we might need to Stifle right now depending on what happens. So alright, there's an Amped Raptor, which is going to pick up the Swift Spear Teachings boon. Basically it grants it prowess and haste, which is, you know, Amped Raptor is already a nasty enough card. I'm a little worried about what's going to happen with the Cascade here, but it gets worse because the opponent has a lightning bolt, so they're just going to take down the Bowmasters. And this is a black fetch, so we have to shock it in if we were going to Stifle, so that's a little unfortunate, but I didn't want them getting like the free card off Amped Raptor, but the opponent is just going off right here. Now this is a mistake, like I'm trying to soak up some damage. I don't know, anyway, I could have blocked one more damage by chumping the Amped Raptor. That's just a mistake, and like you can't make those kind of mistakes against mono red because every life point matters a lot. So we're hanging on for dear life, but it's getting increasingly grim. And the opponent's just going to crash with Den of the Bugbear, which is an awesome, excellent choice from them. Like they might have had spells in hand, but like just doing this forces us to like use our resources, and it preserves their cards in hand. So we're gonna trade with the Den, and Brazen Borrower actually cannot bounce the Den because it's non-land permanent. So we're going to nuke the token and take a little bit of damage. But you could see how much better it would feel to be at 4 life from that previous block than 3. Because now we're dead to like any bolt variant, you know. So there's a Vendilion Clique, and I decided to fire it off right here just because they have so many instants they can attack with, such as Galvanic Blast. A lot of times you want to hit the opponent on their draw step with the Vendilion Clique. So the opponent's crashing in, and I'm going to attempt to trade with the Swift Spear. And we're going to need like a Fatal Push ASAP in order to have a ghost of a chance to win this. But, you know, 19-1 against a red deck is not ideal. And as the opponent is figuring out what they're going to do, I'll go ahead and link a red deck of my own right here. So you could see that if the opponent just attacks in, we're dead. So that's basically it. So we're moving on to the next game. This hand looks nice with both Brainstorm and Thoughtseize. Going to just lead with the Thoughtseize because there's a lot of explosive decks that can either win on turn 1 or set up like an incredible position on turn 1. So we're going to see if we can disrupt that. And we're playing against a mill deck with a lot of really good cards. And so I end up taking Drown in the Loch because I don't care about it as much as a removal spell, more as a counter spell. I'm worried about it. Them just sort of being able to interrupt us back. So they're gonna start the mill train with the Secret Keeper. I'm gonna use Brainstorm here, and trying to figure out what to put back. Like I'm still sort of new to the Brainstorm game. I have played Tempo before. In fact, I'll link another Tempo deck right now, and I'm still getting used to like the whole Brainstorm, like what to put on top, when to shuffle. Like there's a ton of play to the card, and so I do not consider myself an expert. So please let me know in the comments if you see anywhere a Brainstorm I could have improved upon. I'm sure there's plenty. So, all right, happy to see just a Secret Keeper play. Most of our stuff's flyers anyway, so we really don't care about ground creatures. And going to just grab a Surveil here. Another Thoughtseize is pretty dang good, especially because we can hold up like Thoughtseize plus Remand / Mana Drain. So going to interfere a bit more. And they have Demonic Tutor and Drown in the Loch as the unknown cards. I decided to take Fraying Sanity because that's one of the more difficult things for us to deal with. Like we have a couple Brazen Borrowers, but if they get that in play, it could be a big problem for us. So they put an Ashiok on the stack, and my intent was to remand it right here, but I just lost track of my island count. You see me put a Mystic Sanctuary into play for no value. I started looking at my graveyard and was like, oh, okay, yeah, let's get a Mystic Sanctuary. Well, didn't meet the island count, so that's just a mistake. And the one, I guess, good thing about Ashiok resolving there is that it totally nerfs their Drown in the Loch. So I've dabbled with mill decks in the past, and like that is like a really tough non-bow right there. Like I don't know if you should even really play those two in the same deck, even though I've done it. Like they are both good cards, but when they're like, you know, when Ashiok's undoing the Drown in the Loch, it's pretty tough. So I'm going to take Bruvac because, you know, if I had a fetch in hand to guarantee like crack fetch, fatal push it, I'd be feeling a lot better. But once again, just trying to just play it as safe as possible. And that's the tough part there, is once again they nuke our graveyard, and so now the Vendilion Clique is unopposed going after Ashiok. So
I'll return.
wanted to put a creature out there to fight their planeswalkers and then start putting them under a clock. Now they have some like really powerful cards in hand still in Demonic Tutor. Yeah, so they're going to... I don't really know what kind of silver bullets or answers they might have against us, so I'm going to just mana drain it. It seems too risky. Now one thing to note is that with Ashiok gone, our graveyard is starting to build up again, so Draw on the Lock is going to be like turned on very soon. So I'm going to play a Surveil land. And Bowmasters, like, I don't know if they're running like Treasure Cruises and Brainstorms and stuff. Going to crash with Vendilion Clique. It's sometimes like you have that tough choice of like how to use or not use the mana drain man. It seemed like a good time last turn just to let it go. Alright, so they're gonna Lost Legacy. I'm going to just remand it once again just to keep delaying them. It's not like that scary a card against us. Like they have seen a decent amount of our decks. So they're going to like get to extract something from us, but it was more just to keep the cards flowing and would love to hit more land drops. It's entirely possible I'm playing too few mana sources in this deck, but I figure with the Brainstorms and like the Remands, like there's a lot of sort of ways to get decent card velocity. Alright, so we're just going to let this happen. I'm very curious about what they're going to take. And they end up taking out the mana drains, which makes sense. That's just like an unconditional answer for what they're trying to do. So they're going to Secret Keeper us. I'm just going to flash in a Brazen Borrower just to really increase the clock. Now the problem is post Secret Keeper, that means Draw on the Lock is going to be live for killing our creatures or countering basically anything. Alright, so they are going to take down the Brazen Borrower. I'm just going to hold on to Fatal Push, like maybe to kill, like killing crabs is pretty valuable. There is an argument to just using it at the end of turn there for mana efficiency because we are probably going to eventually attack on the ground with the Bowmasters, so it's a tough call, but I end up holding it, especially because like we know there's stuff like Bruvac that we might have to deal with. So there's a Fraying Sanity, but thankfully they're sort of out of juice right now. Just going to put another Brazen Borrower into play and just try and amp up the clock. And at this point I am going to Fatal Push the Secret Keeper because it's looking likely that we're going to start chipping in with Bowmasters because we're also running out of action. So we can ding them for 6 here. And we have 2 points of direct damage with the Bowmasters and a Remand. So basically we just have to like fade like 1 mill spell right here. And yeah, that was enough. So on to the next game. So that was a cool little blue-black battle right there. My opponent's going to need a turn 1 Ragavan. Don't love to see that. I'm actually going to play the Surveil land and keep like a blank on top. You know, like if it was like a Thoughtseize, we definitely would bottom that so they don't get to hammer us with that. So we're just going to let them clear the land off the top for us. And they play Dragon's Rage Channeler. So we have options. We have Remand, Faerie Mastermind, and Bowmasters. Bowmasters seems to be like the most important thing. I actually set an upkeep stop here because I want them, if they're going to counter, I want them to use mana on their own turn. They do let it through, so I'm going to just ding the Ragavan and feel a lot better now that that's off the battlefield. Alright, so we're going to pass back to them. They're in their main phase. They'll crack their fetch. And we have like a pretty strong follow-up. Now this is really tough right here. The opponent's going for some pseudo mana denial. The problem is that they're spreading Seas into an open Bowmaster, so we're just going to direct the damage at the Channeler, and the opponent has seen enough at that point. So on to the next game, and it happens to the best of us. I know I've done stuff like that before, so it's nothing to feel bad about. All right, Artifact Land, Ornithopter, definitely some sort. Well, it appears to be some sort of affinity deck, and you can see me hesitating here. I'm basically deciding between Surveil Land and Fatal Pushing the Ornithopter, and Ornithopter adds to the affinity count, and it can activate stuff like Springleaf Drum, so it is usually worthwhile to get rid of it. So I end up Fatal Pushing it there for mana efficiency and just pass multiple options up. Alright, so the opponent then plays a Patchwork Automaton. This just seems like a classic thing just to remand. It's going to just basically time walk them, you know, like make them, you know, have to replay their whole turn. And it keeps the cards flowing for us. Or there's a Thoughtseize. And a Stifle. So we haven't found any lands. I'm going to attempt to find another land right here with the Brainstorm. And we did find one, but it's a surveil land. So now I have to figure out what to put back against what I assume right now is Affinity. It seems like Spell Pierce and Stifle aren't super useful. Spell Pierce being the least useful. And so I'm planning on just surveilling it away with the surveil land right here. So, and then going to just hammer them with the Thoughtseize right here and try and interrupt them. So the whole game actually hinges on this decision right here, and I make a huge mistake. I'm like, oh, okay, I can like kill these things, and like what I should have taken was the Ensoul artifact. What I completely neglected to realize is that they can just enchant their indestructible land, which we can't deal with Fatal Push. So if I had just taken that, like we could just, you know, Bowmasters block or ping or Fatal Push down, basically any other threat that they have, and instead allowed them to create an indestructible threat, which we can't deal with. And they put it in all that glitters on the stack, which is almost just presenting the lethal right here. So we have options though. I'm gonna Vendilion Clique myself to try and find an answer. So basically, we need a Brazen Borrower to do something against that creature, and I'm like about to block it, but then like, I guess with Bowmasters we have at least 2 blocks against it, so I'm like, okay, maybe I could start the clock with the Vendilion Clique and just Bowmasters block it down. And this is just a mistake right here. I Brazen Borrower on our main phase, and I don't know what I was I think I was thinking like, alright, that takes care of the creature. I was thinking I could Fatal Push when they try and do it again. The problem is they can literally just put it back on and just kill us, so it would have been better to do it on their turn. Anyway, I realized right here, I'm like, what was I doing? So that one was tough. That was just a couple of poor decisions. So had I just taken the Ensoul artifact, I think it would have been a very straightforward game. Made it way harder myself, and then still might have been able to find a way to win it if it played a little more cleanly. So the opponent's surveilling away to Fatal Push. That's one benefit of opening with Flooded Strand. They probably think they're playing against control. Turns out Fatal Push is actually good against our deck. So, alright, they're going to play an Emperor of Bones. We're going to crack our fetch, just get us surveil land. Alright. Brainstorm is tempting, but end up putting it away. Alright, we draw a Cavern. Trying to figure out what to do. I'm going to just put Cavern to play because it's the least damaging land, and it keeps up Remand at the moment. So we'll have to see what the opponent has planned with that Emperor of Bones. Luckily there's no creatures in the graveyard yet to like really make it start going wild. Now, it is annoying though, because we do run, you know, Mystic Sanctuary and 2 dig through times. So like it poaching our graveyard actually does matter, because that's you know, disabling our dig through times and weakening a couple synergies we have going on. Alright, the opponent is going to put a Flage on the stack. Seems like a perfect thing to remand. We don't want it in their graveyard necessarily, and it's just going to like time walk them. Alright, so Emperor Bones is going to keep chewing up our graveyard. So we will need to find an answer to that eventually. Alright, they're going to crash in. We have one more surveil land to get. So going to grab that and see what's in store for us. Another Cavern. We have 3 lands in hand at this point. It doesn't seem useful, even though we have like some card draw. Alright, there's Fatal Push. Don't, you know, the protection spells aren't super likely in timeless, but I'm just going to do it right now, just so it stops eating up our graveyard, just to take care of it. Going to put the fetch into play and just hold up Remand / Brazen Borrower. So the opponent's going to attempt to Flage again. I'm just going to remand it. If they miss a land drop, it's just going to sort of keep them like in limbo right here, basically creating a Groundhog's Day situation for them. Not going to make the Mystic Sanctuary mistake again. So going to Thoughtseize and see what the heck's going on, and then we see it's like, oh wow, and you can see my timer burning next. I'm like, what do I take? They have like a ton of interaction, and then Flage is just to like grind the game out. So I'm really agonizing this, and I take the Witch Enchanter because if you notice their mana base, they actually can't escape Flage right now, and Witch Enchanter gets them like a lot closer to doing that. So I'm going to play Talion, the kind of like, obviously there's like 10 different ways they can like kill it right now. but right now they can't prismatic ending it, and they'd have to pitch a ton of cards into their other thing. That is, unless they draw a fetch, and then they can just Fatal Push it. So, which is what they did. So they drew the fetch, which turns on Fatal Push. Now, they're playing it super patient. They purposely got a Surveil land because they could have played an untapped land and just flaged us right there, but I guess they valued the selection. I'm going to fire off a Dig Through Time here and just see what we can get. All right, and I actually really struggled with this. Like, I knew I wanted Mana Drain, and the timer actually ran out and gave me a fetch, which I was actually strongly considering anyway because of the Brainstorm in our hand. But anyway, I was really struggling with that decision, and the opponent plays a Relic of Progenitus, so that's going to like be able to police our graveyard like somewhat. But if they actually crack it, it's going to nuke like all their fodder for like Flage escapes, you know. Now, because of that swamp, they still actually can't escape a Flage, so I'm going to send in with Brazen Borrower, and they can deal with it. Like, they have the White March, but you know, they would have to pitch at least one card into it. So I'm going to Brainstorm right here and trying to figure out what to do. I'm actually just going to put 2 Faerie Masterminds on top. Wouldn't mind drawing them, and like, given how interaction heavy their deck is, like, I don't expect Brazen Borrower to live that long. Alright, and they're going to just activate Relic. We're going to get rid of a single card. Alright, so they decide to actually march on our end step, pitching a Prismatic Ending. So, it was very tempting to remand that, but decided I'd rather just hold up Vendilion Clique plus Mana Drain / Remand at the moment. So this is a mistake right here. So I attempted to do it on their draw step, but I accidentally did it on their upkeep. So that is just a mistake, because you have to set the upkeep stop, step to the upkeep to the draw step, and then do it. So I didn't. That was like a misclick right there. Fired it off too early. Here comes Flage, and this is just the power of Remand right here. Like, we've just been juggling the Flages back into their hand like the entire game. They have not resolved one yet the whole time. So now, unfortunately, they managed to find what would be the last source they need to escape Flage. So, but fortunately for us, alright, so they're just going to keep activating Relic. You notice that we just picked up a Stifle. So holding on to that, and that's the power of like all this instant speed interaction. So this is, you could see me almost click resolve. I'm like, wait a second, like, what am I doing? I gotta stifle that. That keeps them off escape mana for Flage and just really constrains their options, like just basically locking them down to 1 spell a turn. So they're going to Flage, and now we can like very safely Mana Drain it, because we know that as it stands they can't escape it. So now things are really getting interesting, because we can play 2 copies of Faerie Mastermind on the end step, and definitely going to Mystic Sanctuary here. So I thought about it for a while, because I know they have active Relic right here, but I figured if they crack Relic, that sets them back to the Stone Ages as far as like Flage, and we can trap them right here by playing double Mastermind, because this is their end step, and so that's their second card they've drawn. So that's going to get us 2 fresh draws off the Faerie Mastermind. So it nuked their own graveyard. Sure, we didn't get our Mana Drain, but we drew some fresh cards. Now this is pretty tough, drawing all lands at this point. So, but thankfully with the Mana Drain mana, able to fire off double Faerie Mastermind. So basically, for the low cost of 8 mana, we drew 4 cards. So, very happy to do that. Going to Brainstorm here. Now, I'm getting a little worried, because I think I'm putting the swamp back for sure, because I actually don't know how many fetchable targets we have left. So, putting a fetch and a swamp back with intent to fetch the swamp itself and possibly Thoughtseize them. So it turns out we'd have 1 Watery Grave left also. So that's something you have to be careful about in these decks. You have to really be sharp and know like your fetch count. And as we pass the opponent, I'll go ahead and link a Mardu deck of my own right here. That is a really fun one. Alright, so they do have an Arena of Glory. They have now enabled Flage escaping, but they have like no cards in their graveyard. So we're going to let the Fatal Push happen, because the opponent is just still dead right now. Unfortunately, we don't have a means of stopping the Flage trigger right here. Now, if we had like some sort of revolt trigger, we could have killed our creature in response, and then like, you know, to prevent them from gaining life. You know, there might have been something tricky we could do, but this still seems pretty dang good, sending a double Faerie Mastermind. And once again, their graveyard has been like pretty significantly emptied out. So going to just pass right here. The reason I didn't Thoughtseize is because like they could kill us with like Flage plus Lightning Bolt if we Thoughtseized. So I was a little worried about that. So going to Spell Pierce here at a minimum to tie up their mana. And we'll see if they have like another removal spell. Alright, so there's a Prismatic Ending for the final Faerie Mastermind. However, let's see what their last play is. Tap land, and that means we've got it with the next Faerie Mastermind. So just an awesome grindy mid-range battle right there. So on to the next game. Really happy with how that game worked out. Going to just main phase a Brainstorm right here. Are playing against a Yorion deck. So basically what I'm doing here is hiding my two strongest cards, which are considered to be Thoughtseize and Mana Drain, in case they have like turn 1 discard, you know, or like Grief or something like that. Alright, so it's actually a blue land, and we see them bin a what's it called? Supreme Verdict. No, so they're actually going to surgical away our Brainstorm. So it actually forced us to Brainstorm and shuffle, even though we didn't necessarily want to. You know, got played right there by putting my two best cards on top of the deck. So that can happen sometimes. And on their end step, we're going to put a Bowmasters into play. Like sometimes it's better to wait and snag like a Brainstorm on the stack, you know, with the Bowmasters. But as you can see, we're missing land drops, and we just need to get stuff in play. And it could be that the opponent didn't think we were like a creature heavy deck. That's why they got rid of the Supreme Verdict. It could also be that they already have a copy. That would be pretty bad. So we are sort of like going all out and playing into it, but it does, like, we do need to like force them to have answers. So going to pass here, like, and Remand does nothing against Supreme Verdict. So alright, another tap land. They're gonna pass us. I'm just gonna go for it right here. Alright, so they are going to counterspell, so that's a good sign for us that they don't have the Wrath. Otherwise, they probably would just let that happen. So they're going to attempt to silence this, and I was like, wait a second, like, I actually don't really care. Like, we're an instant speed deck anyway, so almost wasted a Remand there. We didn't even care about it, so thankfully saved it. And the opponent, I don't know if they lost connection or just got frustrated, but we're going to just keep crashing in, and the timeouts and eventually run out, and we just move on to the next game. Now, I'm mulliganing that hand because it's actually double ETB tap land, and I think about this a long time. So let me know in the comments, like, what is your stance on like one land hands or sketchy keeps? Like, have you had any that gone the distance recently? So we're trying it, one land hand keeping, and the thing is with like Brainstorms and Thoughtseizes, like you have decent mileage. The question is, what do you Brainstorm here? Do you Thoughtseize? It's incredibly tough. Really glad the opponent didn't stifle the fetch, otherwise that's like an automatic loss right there. So there is that thing to worry about in Timeless. I decided to Thoughtseize here because there's just so many cracked things people can do. Alright, so they're going to Brainstorm and hide the best of what's going on in their hand. And let's see what they got going on. And I'm like, wow, Veil of Summer, Mana Drain, and Dig. I'm going to take Veil of Summer. It's just super powerful against our deck of blue and black cards, you know. So they're going to Inquisition or Mana Drain away and play a land. So, and we draw a Brainstorm. So like, really need this Brainstorm to go the distance right here. And we do find some lands. So the question is now, what do we put back? And it's pretty clear, like I guess it could be a control deck we're playing against, but it really seems like a combo deck, namely Show and Tell, because those tend to run a lot of main deck Veil of Summers to get through Vexing Baubles and stuff like that, or Thoughtseizes. So I'm on high alert right here, assuming that it's a Show and Tell. So I'm gonna shuffle those cards away and just get the Surveil land. Now we do, like, we can be a pretty mana hungry deck, but I feel like an urgent need to put them under a clock right here, so I'm going to get rid of that land. Now, almost all the time you want to name Faerie with Cavern, but given that they have like a face-up mana drain, I'm actually going to name Orc right here, just to force through an Orcish Bowmasters. Like, if we need to end step it and they have counterspell mana, like mana drain mana open, we can just force it on them. Alright, so the opponent's going to crack their fetch. There's the green land, so it's almost certainly show and tell that we're fighting against. Alright, they're cracking another fetch. And there's a surveil land. And they're going to put the MDFC in the graveyard. Alright, so they're going to attempt to dig on our end step, and this is going to be perfect right here. I checked the graveyard, so they have one card remaining, and so this is actually like a really devastating remand for them, because they're nowhere near recasting Dig Through Time. And I'm actually going to just Brainstorm also on my own end step, just to keep it safe from a mana drain. Because the opponent is probably hungry for whatever mana they can get. And I just don't even want to give them the option to counter it. So happy to hide a Thoughtseize on top. So I have to see what's going to happen. Alright, so there's the Thoughtseize. Don't really want to draw Mystic Sanctuary. Would much rather fetch for it later on. So I'm going to lead with the Thoughtseize, which basically is almost certainly going to trade with Mana Drain. Yeah, so they're going to Mana Drain, basically force the choice. And you can see me monitoring how many cards they have in their graveyard, because if they get another Surveil land, they might have enough already to dig again. With 4 lands in play, and yeah, there's the 4th card in their graveyard. So we could just remand a dig again. They're especially incentivized to do, given that they have that Mana Drain mana coming. Now they lead with the Veil of Summer, which is really annoying because that's going to shut down Remand. However, that will allow us to attempt to slide a Bowmasters underneath that. Alright, so they are going to dig in response. So we did not get to remand the Dig Through Time, which is unfortunate. But good for us is what we finally have a clock into play. And then when Veil of Summer draws, we're going to get to another Bowmasters trigger. Now, they will have hexproof from blue and black, so we'll have to like shoot our own thing, but now we have 3 power in play to attack them with. Now, I don't love that they did finally sneak a Dig Through Time through our defenses, because that alone could have set up the combo. It doesn't seem like Stifle is the best at this point. Like, and you could, much rather bin a Stifle and draw a Mana Drain right there. So that was like a really clutch Surveil. And going to just pass with basically all the cards in hand up right now. Alright, they're just going to pass as well. Who knows like what kind of instant card draw and stuff they have. So gonna toss a Faerie Mastermind into play. Now we are like so close right here. We're going to attack them for 5. And we're getting to the point where with their painful mana base, they may not be able to like easily deploy many more mana sources. Alright, Seek New Knowledge. I spent a lot of time thinking about this, and if we remand it, they just cast it again. So I decided to actually Mana Drain it, because I don't want them just finding like the last piece of the puzzle for them. Now, unfortunately for us, they had another copy of Seek New Knowledge. And so I'm like, oh great, like, if they have, so they have a basic, and if they have a counterspell here, we are toast. But I'm going to attempt to remand the Show and Tell, and it actually worked. Like, we kept the resources low enough that our creatures were able to go the distance here by some miracle, and we lock up the win. Well, that was awesome, and I think I'm getting hooked on these tempo control decks. It's just super fun. A lot of decision making, a lot of ways to like leverage your play skill to try and like get out of situations. Really liked what was going on with like Vendilion Clique and like Orcish Bowmasters working together. So the reason I ended up playing this deck in the first place is sometimes to clear quests, I jump into like the starter deck queue just to try out some stuff, and I played what I think is the now defunct blue-black deck, which was Faeries at that point, and really enjoyed playing stuff like Talion, and just it got me interested in trying to build something like that on my own. Now, unfortunately, I wasn't super impressed with Talion. Like, it basically was like mulliganed away a lot, and like it shined in like one game, but you can't play it at instant speed, and although it's powerful, like I don't know if it's the best fit. I think it might be better served just taking out both copies and putting one more Vendilion Clique and one more Brazen Borrower, and like it might just straight be better that way. I think you might also want the 4th Fatal Push for like battling energy decks and other creature-based stuff, but it's a really great list so far, and you could see some of the other stuff I was considering. Like I think most of the most potent fairies are in here. Like Most of the other stuff, at least until we get Spell Stutter Sprite, like that would be legit. But all these other ones, like I cut for various reasons. This was the closest one I was to including Mischievous Mystic, which, you know, with some of the extra bonus card draw stuff, we can create extra fairies, but I didn't feel like we had enough of that to like justify it, and so I ended up cutting it for like more like interaction, counterspells, discarded stuff. Fae of Wishes is like a possibility one, like you can build like a toolboxy kind of thing, but it doesn't have flash on either side, and so I ended up skipping it. And Spell Stutter is like, you know, Spell Stutter Sprite at home, but just far worse than like having it on an actual creature. Had to shout out Bitter Blossom, but I don't think it's like quite the right for this thing for this play style. Unless you wanted to go all in like Una's Blackguard and go with like a sort of discard fairy rogue kind of thing. So there might be something to that kind of play style as well. I have seen people make Sneaky Snacker work. That I don't think it really is at its best here without like a discard outlet. And there's some other things that we could try and stick some rafts into there. Halo Forager is like another interesting fairy. I don't like how it doesn't have flash. I do like how it lets you flash back from either graveyard, but it like also just dies to Bowmasters. So it doesn't seem like it's quite good enough. But yeah, that's the deck. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to see even more nonsense, please consider subscribing. And if you're already subscribed, thank you for your support. Your engagement with the channel helps me know what the people want. Thank you.